Production funding for the following Vermont election special is provided by Vermont PBS and the Vermont Council on Rural Development, helping Vermont communities develop their capacity to create a prosperous and sustainable future through coordination, collaboration, and the effective use of public and private resources. Live from Rutland's Paramount Theatre, it's the Gubernatorial Forum on Economic Challenges and Key Opportunities for Vermont's Economic Future in a Time of Climate Change. Here's Paul Costello, Executive Director of VCRD.
Hello, and welcome everyone to this Gubernatorial Forum on Vermont's Economic Future in a Time of Climate Change. We're delighted to be here in beautiful Paramount Theatre, downtown Rutland, Vermont, the nation's solar city. Yeah. And with Vermonters from throughout the state, through our partners at Vermont PBS. We're honored to have with us 5 leading candidates for Governor of Vermont: Matt Dunn, Peter Galbraith, Bruce Listman, Sue Minter, and Phil Scott. Thank you for being with us. The Vermont Council on Rural Vermont sees that Vermont shares the economic challenges that beset all of rural America: the loss of manufacturing, the challenge of retaining and attracting youth in entrepreneurism, the high cost of infrastructure, schools, and services. But unlike many rural parts of this country, we see a constellation of assets and a creative dynamism in the working lands economy, in the renewal of our downtowns like downtown Rutland, in the expansion of local energy generation and efficiency efforts, in innovative resource use and reuse, and in the incubation of small businesses as seeds for the future. We also see a national and international search for economic solutions to climate change. In this era of dramatic change, where will businesses lead and profit by developing these solutions? Where will communities model opportunities for rural renewal? Why not right here? We're excited to hear each of our candidates' thoughts on the challenges and opportunities ahead and what they would do to bolster the economic foundations of the state and promote opportunities for prosperities for all Vermonters. We're honored by the partnership of the Paramount Theatre and Vermont PBS, by the lead sponsorship of Northfield Savings Bank, and by support from Ben & Jerry's, Casella Resource Solutions, the Vermont Country Store, and the Lintelock Foundation. We thank them for their contributions to this event. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our forum moderator, veteran Vermont journalist, the incomparable Chris Graff.
Thank you, Paul. And good evening, everyone, from the Paramount Theatre in Rutland. The Vermont Council on Rural Development in general, and Paul Costello in particular, are really Vermont treasures. We are very fortunate to have them. They're always looking around the corner at the future, trying to help us plan for the uncertainty of the future. So thank you for all the work that you do at VCRD. We are delighted to be at the Paramount. Built in 1912 and 1913, this hall is a gem. It has hosted Tom Thumb, Will Rogers, Sarah Bernhardt, Ethel Barrymore, and the great Houdini. We have our own magic show here tonight, asking these 5 candidates to help us sort through Vermont's uncertain future. The focus tonight is very specific, asking about a very specific issue. It's not a free-ranging forum. We'll be focused on Vermont's economic future in a time of climate change. That's the focus tonight, and that's what makes this a little different than most of your normal forums. The format is simple. I'll ask a question. Each candidate has 1 minute to answer. Jenna will make sure that they answer within that 1 minute. We've been gathering audience questions, and we'll mix them in now and then as time permits. At the end, we'll ask our candidates for 1 minute to tell us why they should be your next governor. We have with us tonight 2 Republican candidates and 3 Democratic candidates. This is something that's been happening this year. It is unusual to have all 5 candidates before a primary. And you have to look at them that way. If you're going to vote in the Democratic primary on August 9th, you should be thinking about the 3 Democratic candidates. If you're going to vote in the Republican primary and you're looking to vote there on August 9th, you should be focusing on Bruce Listman and Phil Scott, because it's not like a Chinese menu. You can't pick from one from column A and one from column B. 2 of these leaders will be on the ballot in November. So let's start now with a general question on the economy. And we're going to start first with Matt Dunn. We're going to ask each of you to describe the key economic challenges facing Vermont today, as well as the key opportunities for future economic success. 1 minute.
Well, thank you for having us, and it's great to be here in this jewel of Rutland that is the Paramount Theater. Vermont has been transitioning for about 40 years from large-scale manufacturing and large-scale commodity dairy to something else. And the challenge is we haven't figured out what that something else is yet, nor changed our strategy in order for us to get there. And what we're seeing as a result is a rise in poverty and a housing crunch that's turning into a homeless crisis. I believe that we need to take a variety of steps. That includes a major investment in affordable housing, raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, and bringing forward the entrepreneurial spirit that we all know is possible. That's going to require that we have the electricity of our time, which is broadband, and that's going to mean that we actually leverage our phenomenal brand to be the leader in agriculture when the water runs out in the West, and we can get value-added agriculture here, in energy innovation, and in innovation in our shops and homes across the state.
Peter Galbraith.
Vermont has the same challenges as other rural areas in terms of being subject to the same macroeconomic and demographic trends. But I prefer to look on our strengths. And what is our strength? Vermont is a great place to live. And the reason it's a great place to live is because of our extraordinary natural environment, because of our excellent schools. We're the second healthiest state, we're one of the safest states, and we care about one another. And these are paid for by taxes for the very good public services we have. Our quality of life is our comparative advantage. And with the very limited resources that our state has, I think that's the place where we should invest, in protecting our environment, maintaining quality services. But we also need to do more to make Vermont affordable for those for whom it is the least affordable, those at the bottom of the income spectrum. I entered this race to promote a $15 minimum wage by 2021. That will do more to make it affordable for those for whom it is the least affordable.
Bruce Listman.
Yes, in a minute or less, let's reduce the cost to live here. Let's finally solve the property tax crisis that affects all of us who own a home or commercial property or who buy from others. Let's have a government that works for us instead of the other way around. Let's have an ethics package that tells people exactly who is in charge, and then finally not only where our money goes, but how well it's spent. Let's think about 40,000 plus college kids who are here for 4 to 6 years, and let's convince them with a systematic program why they should stay here after graduation. Let's think about all those employers who left and make a pact among ourselves tonight and say, no more should leave. But we don't know who they are, and we don't know what drives them, but we better start pretty soon. And let's think about the 96% of the employers in this state employing 60% of the labor force, called small businesses. Some few are about to become big businesses, but we need to know who they are before they leave. Thank you.
Sue Minter.
Traveling our state on this campaign, what I see more and more is that too many Vermonters are struggling just to make ends meet in an economy that's stacked against them, and we need to change that story. As your governor, I will focus on 3 things. First, creating economic opportunity through 2 new programs, Invest Vermont and Innovate Vermont, giving us the tools for creating livable wage jobs, great communities to keep young people here in Vermont. Second, I want to help support working families and grow ladders of opportunity out of poverty and a workforce for the future with 2 years tuition-free at CCV and VTC. Third, I'll continue to be a strong steward for our environment, fighting for clean water and a clean, green energy economy to help combat global climate change. This is my plan to make Vermont work. You can count on me because I have the skills, the vision, and the experience to make Vermont work and to lead us forward. Thank you.
Phil Scott.
We're actually suffering from an affordability crisis here in this state. There are more people, less people working now than there were 7 years ago. The workforce has shrunk in many different ways. We've been, again, ignoring this problem for the last several years. The stagnant population that we have, 625,000 people that we have in this state, that's been the same way for the last couple of decades. But what's shifting is our demographics. We're losing the category from 25 to 45. We've lost 30,000 people out of that category alone in the last 10 years, since the last census. We have to pay attention to that. Those are the folks that have homes, have families, utilize services, buy products. And when they're not doing that, when they're not in the workforce and bringing in that income, then they're putting the burden on the rest of us that are still here. So we have to incentivize the workforce in that category alone, provide for affordable housing for the workforce, the struggling middle class here in Vermont. And that's going to be the answer to our survival.
Let's talk for a minute about taxes before we move into climate change. We have a difference of opinion among the five of you about Vermont's taxing capacity. Phil Scott, you have said Vermont doesn't have taxing capacity. Peter Galbraith, you have said Vermont's got some taxing capacity. Starting with you, Peter Galbraith, can you give us your opinion on what you think Vermonters can handle about tax increases or tax reform?
I'll start with the fact that we have a tax code that is larded with special interest tax breaks that were inserted by lobbyists, like the $1 million tax break you get if you own a private jet airplane, but not if you own a car. I have identified $28.5 million in special interest tax breaks and corporate subsidies. The elimination will affect no working Vermonter, and I will use that money to provide 4 years free tuition at Vermont state colleges, all the state colleges, not just 2 years at CCV or VTC.
Bruce Listman.
$700 million. That's taxes, fees, surcharges, property taxes raised over the last 6 years. On a base of 626,000 people, only half of whom likely pay taxes, only half of those likely pay the bulk of taxes. That's a big increase on a small state like ours. It clearly impacts disposable income, but it's really put a chill on our economy. There's a reason why we suffer population loss, and there's a reason why our workforce has been diminished. A high cost to live here has an important impact on those who work here, those who employ others, and those who would like to retire here. And for those reasons, I tell you, we've had enough. In truth, over 6 years, looking back, you can't tell me that we're better for all that spending. And so I would say no more taxes.
Sue Minter.
You know, any conversation about taxes has to be brought in same conversation. What are the problems we need to solve? And let's say we have many of them. Now, I know that people do not want to leave people homeless and in poverty. I know people want to encourage investments, especially in renewable energy. I know that we have huge challenges to solve and that our economy has transformed significantly. 50 years ago, when the tax code was created, we had an economy based on durable goods. Now our economy, 2/3 of it, is based on services. I want to have a very large, broad discussion about tax reform so that we can actually broaden the base and lower the rates. We can't cut services. We need to keep Vermont moving forward. When we reduce what we invest, we also have negative economic consequences. So whenever we make a decision on how to invest, we need to let the taxpayers know what they're getting for the value of their investment. That's what I'll do as your governor.
Phil Scott.
The legislature has been raising taxes and fees for the last 7 years without paying any attention to the economy. And the governor, Douglas, back in 2009, had said he vetoed the budget because he said it was unsustainable. But the legislature thought better. The legislature decided to override that veto. And to this day, you can look back and see that it was about $100 million difference. Every year since we faced the deficit, every year since the legislature has decided to raise taxes and fees on hardworking Vermonters. And we can do better than that. We should be focusing on what we can do to help ourselves. And instead of the 1,211 bills that were introduced 2 years ago, with 30 of them having a positive effect on the economy, with 3 of the out of the 30 being passed, instead, Instead, we should be looking at more of those types of bills, things that we can do to help ourselves out of the dilemma we find ourselves in.
And Matt Dunn.
So the first thing you do is you don't start with talking about taxes. You talk about the needs. And what Vermont is hungry for is a plan. How are we going to deal with the heroin epidemic that is affecting us all across the state? How are we going to make sure that Vermonters are graduating from college without a mountain of debt on their shoulders? How are we going to make sure we incentivize, making sure that people look to Vermont startups first when they make their investments? You start with a plan, and then you match the revenues to be able to meet that plan, whether they're existing revenues or having to look for new ones. But what Vermonters are looking for is a plan. The other thing that I hear from Vermonters is about property taxes. I believe that we should be paying for education more on ability to pay. That shift alone will make a huge difference in middle-class Vermonters.
Let's start now on climate change. First, we have to get on the same page and ask all 5 of you, is climate change real? Is it significantly caused by human behavior? And the third part of that question, do we have the opportunity to affect it by our behavior as a state, as a nation, or globally? And we start with Bruce Lissman.
Yes. Well, 1, yes. 2, yes. 3, we do. It depends on why we're doing it. So I was struck by the Department of Public Services comment last year in which they said all the efforts we've made in solar and industrial wind are not about the atmosphere or weather or change of climate, but rather about the economy. And I would say to that, that's an expensive way to create jobs. And the subsidization that actually ratepayers providing that subsidy means we ought to look at it differently. So if we're looking at our climate, if we're considering the negative impacts from global warming, then I think we look at our own behavior. But when we talk about jobs, I think we need to put it in the context of the cost to create those and make sure that we're not kidding ourselves.
Sue Minter.
Yes, climate change is real and it is here. Any of us who were affected by Irene saw what the effects of climate disruption mean to individuals and families. I had the opportunity to serve on behalf of the governor on President Obama's task force on climate preparedness and resilience, and saw what was happening across this country, working with leaders in California with historic drought, in Colorado with fires and floods, in the coast of Miami Beach, looking at storm surge. We have a serious problem and we must take action. It's the issue of our time. And yes, we can make a difference, absolutely. Every individual can make a difference by turning out their lights, by changing their investment in their home, heating, heat pumps, by driving an electric car like I am. We can make a difference, and Vermont is a leading-edge state in seeing how our climate economy can actually help grow opportunities for green jobs, for a green economy, and for reducing our carbon footprint. We have to do it.
Phil Scott.
Yes, I do believe climate change is real, and it could be for many different reasons. I'd rather look at what we can agree to. There are many who think it's caused by human behavior. There are some that believe it's due to climate change on a changing worldwide basis. But again, I'd rather focus on what we can agree to. And many of us, we should all be able to agree with energy independence. Reducing our reliance on foreign oil, fossil fuels, is so essential to our future. And things that we can do ourselves. You're doing it here in Rutland. We're doing it in Vermont in many different ways with the solar industry. Wind generation, I don't think is the answer, but solar could be the future, and done well, sited properly with local input. I think that that's some of the future that we look forward to cut down the cost. The affordability crisis that we face today could be solved with us taking care of ourselves in many different ways.
Matt Dunn.
So climate change is real and it's man-made. Anyone who looks at the science knows that. And a little over a year ago, a friend named Bill McKibben asked me to come over to Middlebury to have dinner with him to encourage me to get into the race for governor. And it was because he felt that Vermont was stuck, that we were not living up to our role in the country as a leader in this area. And so I believe we need to get back to that leadership place. We need to move forward with divesting from coal and ExxonMobil. We need to make sure that we are doing strategies to reduce our carbon footprint that put people to work, like the Green Jobs Fund that we have proposed, that will create a $100 million bond to invest in efficiency work in our apartment buildings across the state, putting people to work, dropping our carbon footprint, and making our apartment buildings more livable.
Peter Galbraith.
Climate change is real, it's man-made, and along with nuclear weapons, it is one of the two most significant threats to our survival as a planet. It is also a global phenomenon, and I have a unique qualification to deal with it because I have been dealing in the international world for most of my career. In fact, I helped enact the very first treaty in 1987 to deal with climate change, the treaty that has protected the ozone layer over Antarctica. And I know that, yes, we need to do our part in Vermont, but we need a governor who can operate nationally and internationally, because this is not just a problem in Vermont. Whatever we do in Vermont will not solve it. We have to solve it globally, and we have to do our part. I'm proud of the fact that I initiated the successful effort to ban fracking in Vermont, making Vermont the first state in the country to ban fracking. And I'll go further. Let's repeal the investment tax credit, which is a special interest tax break for investments in advanced coal technology and gasification. Yes, folks, that's one of the special interest tax breaks I want gone.
Sue Minter, this question starts with you. It's from the audience. We actually have 4 or 5 questions along this line, so it's definitely a hot issue. Most economists, right or left, claim that the most consistent and effective way to reduce carbon emissions would be to tax them. Where do you stand on carbon pricing? Could a carbon pricing mechanism benefit the economy? And are there any circumstances in which you believe Vermont should lead in developing a carbon tax? Sue Minter.
Well, I think the pricing mechanism is very important because it does create the incentives for people to use or not use carbon-based fuels. That is where a key point of my energy and climate plan focuses on reducing peak electric demand, so we are actually stopping to use the most expensive and dirtiest fuel. But it also looks to regionally build upon a regional greenhouse gas initiative throughout the Northeast by adding transportation fuels to a cap and invest program. Yes, a pricing program where we are actually incentivizing using fewer carbon-based fuels, electric cars, rail, transit, bicycle, walking. That's what we need to do more of to get off of our transportation carbon footprint, which is 46% of Vermont's carbon problem. So we are going to be working regionally to build off RGGI and make sure we are reducing that carbon footprint through pricing.
Phil Scott.
I'm in favor of energy independence. I'm in favor of renewables, ways that we can take care of ourselves. But a carbon tax, I believe, would have a detrimental effect on our economy in so many different ways. It will increase the cost of living throughout Vermont. If you think about everyone that would have to pay, whether you're utilizing services, whether you're buying products, whether you're buying food, whatever the case may be, all of them would have to pay with this carbon tax, which just ratchets up the cost of living. That's the problem we face today, this affordability crisis in Vermont. We're not on an island. We have to compete with our neighbors. We have to compete regionally. We have to compete internationally. And for us to impose a carbon tax on our workforce, on our struggling members of Vermont, would be detrimental. And I would not be in favor of that.
Matt Dunn.
So I've had the pleasure of working for a company called Google that is carbon neutral. And I got to see firsthand the incredible impact that happens when you actually are using your carbon offsets to make a difference in the community. And that's why I believe the first step for us to take is a cap and trade arrangement working with Canada and with California. That would allow us to move forward with understanding the impact and creating a marketplace to capture that cost of carbon. This can be done. I've already been in touch with Catherine McKenna, who is the minister in charge of climate change in Canada, about how to make this happen. We can get there, and we can lead the nation.
Peter Galbraith.
If we're going to deal with a carbon pricing system, we cannot do it in Vermont alone, and that is why it is something that we need to do on a broader basis, nationally and internationally. And again, my experience and background is going to be very relevant. Actually, Catherine McKenna, the Canadian Environment Minister, worked for me at one point in time, and we have been in touch about various issues. So this is something that we can do, but we are not going to be able to solve this problem alone in Vermont. In Vermont, let's focus on what we can do, which is efficiency and conservation. We get 10 times the carbon reduction through efficiency and conservation than from anything else that we do. And the only reason we don't put more resources into it is that utilities don't make money. Developers don't make money from the kilowatt not generated. But that's not a reason for the state of Vermont not to do the thing that will most reduce the most carbon.
Bruce Listman.
Yes, so I'm opposed to it. I understand the need for pricing something like fossil fuels, and large energy companies are already reporting their version of it. The idea of doing it here in Vermont, whether in affiliation with another state or even the region, makes no sense to me. Vermonters, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, tell me everywhere in the state they are tired of being experimented upon. I mean it. They're tired of healthcare experiments. They're tired of experiments in controlling our schools from Montpelier, and this is something they don't want. People rightfully say, Vermonters rightfully say, their government is not listening to them. And if we push ahead, even with the discussion of a carbon tax or cap and trade unique to our state, we are telling Vermonters we don't care what you say, because they are clearly saying they want a new direction, and it does not include this kind of discussion.
Our next question starts with Phil Scott, and we're moving now into the discussion of the climate economy. The climate economy has been defined as the conjunction of tech development, the working lands economy, wise resource use and reuse, efficiencies in buildings and transportation, and clean energy development, foundations of the economy of the future. Are there ways that Vermont can build businesses and jobs by adapting to and mitigating climate change? Phil Scott.
Well, absolutely, and we've seen it in so many different ways. Look at what we've done with the solar industry in particular. If we just paid attention as a government to helping all businesses the way we've helped the solar industry, look at how they've grown. But it's all due to tax incentives, and those are the ways that have grown that sector of our industry. It's the same way with other areas of government, but that in particular, we should be the home, the magnet of many different businesses that hope to land here. But in the end, they all have to be able to afford to stay here. They all have to be treated properly. They all have to pay utility bills for manufacturing. They all have to pay property taxes. They all have to absorb the high costs of living here in Vermont. So first of all, we need to get our house in order. We have to live within our means as a state government. We can't spend more than we're taking in like we've done for the last 6 or 7 years. And that's the first order. Predictability, certainty in government is something that will attract many businesses to Vermont, but we have to get our own house in order first.
Matt Dunn.
We have already started to see the impact of economic growth because of climate change. We've had a huge growth, I think the largest growth in employment related to the renewable energy field right here in the state of Vermont. We're seeing with Green Mountain Power innovation happening all over the state, and particularly in the Innovation Center right here in Rutland, that has the potential to spin off companies and create more jobs. We need to make sure that our businesses are also ready, though, for the kinds of climate changes that we're already seeing, ready for that resilience and making sure that they're stable so they can succeed. But it can also be things like manufacturing. There's a company that creates something called a Vermont that came out of Hurricane Irene, that over my way in White River Junction, they're creating net energy zero small homes to replace trailers and double wides. They're creating jobs right now. And the same is true with a Green Jobs Fund that I proposed that will put people to work and have job training opportunities in making our apartment buildings more efficient.
Peter Galbraith.
Yes, of course there are great opportunities and we can take advantage of them. We'll be able better to take advantage of them if we expand broadband to the rural areas of our state, which would enable people to work from their homes in the way that they can't do now, and would facilitate a more environmentally friendly transportation system using Uber-like apps. And we certainly need to look at the opportunities for agriculture that are created by longer growing seasons. But I'm also concerned as we put all this money and emphasis on supporting corporations, like the $21 million that we gave Green Mountain Power so they could pay off $21 million in golden parachutes to CVPS managers, that we're not looking after working Vermonters. And that's why it is paramount importance to me that we raise the minimum wage to $15 by 2021, and we make it possible for young Vermonters to go for all 4 years to our state colleges without having to come out having to worry about tuition debt. We need to make sure the economy works for everybody, not just for the utilities.
Bruce Listman.
Well, one great definition of entrepreneurship and innovation is seeing a problem and solving it. And if we have companies who can help us conserve energy or use a resource differently, then I say have at it. And the fact that in the latest report published by the very group that is sponsoring this, offered up a variety of examples of companies that are in business, says there's an opportunity, and I believe in it. You ought to know, though, that we have a bigger problem. Outside of Chittenden County, the economy of all of our counties is getting older, thinner, and frankly more fragile. And even in Chittenden County, growth is not 100% of the national average, more like 80% of the national average. And we have an alarm clock that's ticking away and frankly ringing off the wall. And so this is good. Climate is a thing to solve and it's important, but we have real problems in front of us and we need to get work at enabling a stronger economy.
Sue Minter.
Yes, we can create economic opportunity out of this climate economy, and we must. I am so pleased to have been a member of the council, the Climate Economy Council, and to have been inspired by many of the ideas generated. It's why I've created my economic development plan includes Innovate Vermont, looking at the 4 key sectors of innovation for the 21st century to help Vermont, the high-tech industry, the advanced manufacturing, and the green economy, the renewable energy and efficiency economy, 17,000 jobs already, 6% increase in our economy in that sector, and finally, the farm, forest, and food economy. These sectors are our opportunity. They build upon our assets because we can't wait. We must innovate. We must seize the opportunity, know what we can do as a great economy for the future, and yes, reduce our carbon footprint, particularly in the transportation sector, where we can innovate with rural electrification of the fleet and rural transportation.
Many describe the natural resource economy and Vermont's working landscape as a core value, and also a foundation for resilience in the age of climate change. How important is this economy to Vermont, and what would you do to ensure that it thrives in the future? Matt Dunn, we're back to you.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the beginning of the question again?
Yes. The natural resource economy is what we're talking about, and Vermont's working landscape as a core value.
It is absolutely a core value. It's what has given us the brand that we have today. It is one of quality, and it is one of trust. And we need to be absolutely committed to maintaining both of those things. And we risk losing it when we have the EPA come in and say we are failing our lake. And we risk losing it when we are not committed to making sure we have agricultural practices that are sustainable. And we risk losing it when we are not focused on getting our goods and products, whether they are wood products or they're products that are made in our farms and fields, out to the marketplace beyond us. It is absolutely critical that we maintain those strengths, and we have the opportunity to build it out further and to have value. But we have to make sure we're investing in cleaning up our lakes. We have to invest in making sure our farmers know the best practices to deliver good agricultural products that people can trust. And we have to make sure we're marketing Vermont to make sure those goods and services get the premium that they deserve.
Peter Galbraith.
Our natural resources, our agriculture, our forests, our lakes, our mountains, are what makes Vermont what it is, along with our people. So, of course, it is a central value. And I think we need to focus on how we protect these resources. As a senator, I put forward legislation to protect the contiguity of our forests, which is going to be so essential as species adapt to climate change, and to protect our ridgelines and higher elevations, which also will be essential as species adapt to climate change. And we need to be sure that we are continuing the opportunities for a sustainable agriculture. And as we approach our waterways, we need to be investing, not allowing failed septic systems and failed sewage plants and unsustainable agricultural practices destroy our lakes, including particularly Lake Champlain.
Bruce Listman.
Easy to agree. It's where we are, and oftentimes it's why we live here. It's an environmental heaven, except we have a couple of problems. Lake Champlain is under an EPA mandate. If it, as it were, the EPA now owns our lake and is mandating a cleanup, that's going to be costly and complicated and even intricate, and it might take 10 or 20 years if we get at it yesterday to prove to you that we've actually done something. I've offered up a plan, others too as well, including the state and the EPA, and we need to get started to prove to you that our government can get things done. And I mean it, because in the last 6 years we've come to believe this government, maybe Washington too, can't get anything done. But let's start with the lake, and let's start with the northern part of the lake, which is clearly the most troubled. And the idea is to tell you step by step what we're doing and what we've done. And through that, build a partnership on the environment so that we know there's a direction and this government can help solve it.
Sue Minter.
Yes, our natural beauty and our working lands are absolutely central to what is Vermont, but also the opportunity for Vermont's future. It's why one of the 4 key sectors I outline in Innovate Vermont is the farm, food, and forest economy. But it's also something I think we need to promote even more. And that's why I put out a plan to focus on our recreation economy and the outdoor industry, to actually build upon our assets, to actually create new networks. For example, mountain bike trails. We have tremendous assets in mountain biking, and mountain biking is an incredible growing sport. As an avid athlete and a lifelong outdoors woman, this is a place that I think we have a sweet spot in Vermont and we can grow. Why? When I went to visit Burton Snowboards, who was working there? Young people who have moved to Vermont to be a part of a great company in the great outdoors of Vermont because of our lifestyle, because of who we are. We need to promote that. We need someone in the governor's office to work with the outdoor industry and make sure we build a greater opportunity for recreation and outdoor industry.
And Phil Scott.
I grew up in Barrie. I've lived here my entire life thus far. And I believe that we need to continue to protect our environment, protect our tradition and culture. It's essential to who we are. It's part of our DNA. When you look at what is important to us as an industry, you look at our tourism. And a lot of that is because of the culture that we have, the traditions we have, whether it's in forestry or agriculture, and we need to protect that as well. There's been a lot of talk about the phosphorus in Lake Champlain as a result of some of the agricultural practices. And we didn't get here overnight. There needs to be balance. We need to take care of them. And as a government, I think that we can provide some certainty to them as well, to provide for them some help and assistance in trying to make a much better Vermont, a cleaner lake, but protecting our environment and protecting, it doesn't have to be one or the other. We can do both. And if we put our heads together, pull in the same direction, I'm confident that we can have the Vermont that we cherish so much.
You're watching a gubernatorial forum live from the Paramount Theater in Rutland, Vermont, with 5 leading candidates for governor. We want to tell you, though, that if you're getting a little confused about the Democrats and the Republicans, that Vermont PBS has debates coming up that will feature the 2 Republicans and the 3 Democrats. The August 1st, from 8 to 9, live on Vermont PBS, the Republicans will debate. August 2nd, 8 to 9, the Democrats will debate. And then August 22nd, you can plan your whole summer here, live on Vermont PBS. There'll be a debate on the subject of education. We're coming to you live from the Paramount Theater. The Paramount Theater has had this wonderful project going on since last year, going on through the presidential election, also the gubernatorial election here in Vermont, Project 240. This week there is one of the events is coming up on Thursday here at the Paramount Theater. They'll be watching the final night of the Republican National Convention. And then next week, watching the final night of the Democratic National Convention. You can have an all-Graff week here at the Paramount. Garrett Graff will be speaking Thursday night here at the Paramount, and then Garrett is a former editor of Politico magazine. Next Thursday, David Sanger of the New York Times will be here speaking. And then they'll be watching together the acceptance speeches. Looks like Donald Trump for the Republican nomination and Hillary Clinton for the Democratic nomination. All coming up here at the Paramount Theater. Let's talk now about distribution generation and the energy economy. While Vermont is making great progress in advancing renewable electricity and spurring small business and job creation in this sector, it is not without some growing pains. Do you support the goals in Vermont's state energy plan? Are we going too fast or not fast enough? And how do you envision the energy economy in 2050? And we start this one with Peter Galbraith.
Well, most of all, I'm looking forward to see if we meet that goal of 90% renewable by 2050, and I want to be there to check it out. I do support the goal, but I think we have to make wise choices as to how we get there. As I said earlier, we get 10 times the carbon reduction from efficiency and conservation than we do from any type of generating new electricity. So that should be our primary focus. I believe that that supports strongly the development of solar, but I think it can be done in a way that is consistent with town plans and Act 250 and not have the Public Service Board and the big utilities run roughshod over it. And I am opposed to destroying Vermont's ridgelines with industrial wind turbines from out-of-country and out-of-state corporations, which then sell the renewable credits out of state so that Connecticut utilities and industries can call their energy green. If they want green energy Connecticut, put them on Connecticut hills. Don't make us the dumping ground.
Bruce Listman.
I actually read the report. I don't support it because I don't think it's a realistic plan. A good strategic plan has lots of things in it that this doesn't. I'd like to remind everybody that the Department of Public Service has as its origins and deeply embedded in its charter the role of speaking on behalf of ratepayers. That's you and me. Regardless of what you think about renewables, it has an obligation to speak to reliability, but also the price you pay. It's supposed to lean against efforts that would effectively raise our prices. So it would have been nice to have had some balance to the report. I'm very concerned about big wind and big solar, but in particular big wind, and particularly in the Northeast Kingdom and a couple of communities near here. I think the best thing we should do is put a moratorium on any kind of siting for the next 2 years, put in real teeth to the notion of an environmental impact statement, an Act 250-like process giving people locally the power to say yes or no, to give them a piece of the equity if that's what they want, or in turn be reimbursed for loss of value to their homes if in fact they didn't want it.
Sue Minter.
Well, I think we have to continue to meet the goal, and yes, I support the goal of 90% renewable by 2050. And it's going to take all of us working together, and it's going to take every piece of the pie, including wind, including solar, bio energy, micro hydro. We've got to keep going. Yes, we need to have a voice from communities, and yes, we need to have better planning. but I want to think about innovation, like the Innovation Center of Green Mountain Power and what's happening on how we can actually store energy, how individuals can actually be part of the solution. I think distributed energy is key. We want to incentivize solar on rooftops, in parking lots, and definitely focus on smaller scale distributed energy. But we can't go backwards. We can't turn our back on what is happening across this country. This is part of my peak demand, my energy and climate plan to reduce peak demand, reduce prices, and reduce carbon use.
Phil Scott.
I believe we need goals. I think they're essential to how we look at things. I look at the state in Vermont and its population challenges, and I look for a goal of reaching 700,000 in the next 15 or 20 years. I think that's a goal. I think obtaining energy independence is a goal, and I think it can be obtainable if we play our cards right. And in a lot of respects, if you look back at how far we've come technologically, in the last 20 years. It's astounding. And the game changer, the big game changer, will be when we are able to store renewable energy efficiently. And it'll be through battery storage of some sort. It's starting right now. We've seen it on a small scale. It's going to have to be bigger in nature in order for renewables to make sense. So if technology changes, which I'm confident it will, we're innovative by nature. I think Vermont could play a part in that too. But I think that the future is bright for us if we, again, can gain some consensus, pull together in the same common way.
Matt Dunn.
I believe it is our responsibility to get to 90% renewable energy by 2050, either through renewable energy development or through reduction through efficiency measures. And that's why we proposed the Green Jobs Fund to make a huge difference in our energy footprint by reducing energy use in our apartment buildings. But I also felt that it was important for my family to walk the walk. And so we put 150 kW of solar panels on our property. And we had conversations with our neighbors. And sometimes they were a little tough. But we found a location that worked for everyone. And that's the same approach that we need to bring. We cannot just put everything on hold, and in fact, we did for a little while this past 6 months where projects that were ready to go were stopped. We need to make sure that we are doing the planning that we had intended when we did Act 250 so we know where we want it, where we don't, and so we can get people to work building a renewable energy future for Vermont.
I'm going to actually go another round on that. Had a really interesting discussion. I think there's more to be said on that. So I'm going to use an audience question to help you focus it. How do we manage the transformation of energy production in a way that does not tip moderate income Vermonters into financial unsustainability? Bruce Listman, we start with you.
We might start by a consideration of those in that level of incomes having no way to defend themselves from the siting of those wind towers. So the Northeast Kingdom has become a dumping ground, at least in their view. So a true democracy is one that reflects the will of the majority but protects the rights of the minority. And we worry about their ability to afford higher costs of energy. We might consider the lost value of their homes or their incapacity to live near those wind towers. So that's why I've urged us to come up with new siting rules. Because in fact, we're going to try to put things where there aren't a lot of people, and in many cases they don't have the income or the resources to defend themselves. 142-0 vote on new siting regulations, which wasn't that good anyway, was vetoed in a new bill that had a further washout of those restrictions, and frankly, now we have no protections. So, in my view, we need something.
Sue Minter.
But we have to focus on efficiency first, because the cleanest, cheapest energy we use is that which we do not have to purchase. But let's remember, we've been escalating our renewable energy, 10-fold increase in solar, and by the way, our electric rates have gone down 2 out of the last 3 years, and we're the second lowest in New England. So the thought that we're increasing costs for middle-income Vermonters by investing in renewables doesn't be the case. We have to continue to do efficiency. We need innovation, we need storage, and we need every bit that we can of renewable energy to reduce our use of carbon emissions. We can, and we are, and we will. And yes, we need better planning. Yes, we need a voice in siting. But I think it needs to continue to be at the Public Service Board, and they are the ones who are actually seeing the whole picture. And I know that when we work together, we can come up with ways to actually site facilities in places where communities want them instead of battling developers versus communities.
Bill Scott.
Community participation is important, and it's essential if we move forward, especially with large-scale solar or wind energy. I'm not in favor of doing any more developing on our ridge lines. I think that that's a precious resource as well, and that we should continue to look in other ways in solar. But solar has to be properly sited as well, not just aesthetically, but by need. We need to put those in the areas that need the power, and I think that that's the part that's missing as well. We need, for small families or families that are struggling to make ends meet, the affordability crisis is real. And I think access to capital is part of the answer. I visited a home right here in Rutland just last week, and they've done a great job in conjunction with Green Mountain Power to access capital. They were given a loan to move forward, and their costs were reduced dramatically, and they were able to use the savings in order to pay off the loan. So in the long run, by that investment, they'll be much better off and be able to afford to stay here in Vermont.
Matt Dunn.
A lot of it comes from the way that we're able to finance it. The Vermont product, which is a energy neutral, or absolutely green mobile home, is expensive unless you build in the fact that you're not going to have to pay an electric bill every month. And what's exciting, and we're starting to see credit unions in the state of Vermont being willing to do the financing that builds in that knowledge, that there will not be a cost month after month into how they are able to finance it. That's going to allow for moderate income Vermonters and even low income Vermonters to be able to take advantage of this innovation that's coming out right now. We also need to make sure that we're investing in microgrids. And what that means is energy that is produced in a community that's then used by the community. You don't lose as much energy in the transmission, and people feel ownership throughout that community no matter who you are. And then finally, we need to make sure that people are able to purchase electric vehicles, because I don't know anyone who believes that less than $1 per gallon equivalent gas is a bad thing.
Peter Galbraith.
I will be a governor who will side with ratepayers and the people of Vermont and not with the utilities and the large corporations. And I will appoint a public service board that will side with the people and not be captured, as this one is, by the utilities. We saw this public service board overrule a previous ruling that said the $21 million that had been borrowed from ratepayers at the time of from CVPS, it wasn't returned, and instead ratepayers would build another $21 million. That's an example of the kind of corporate power that I don't want to continue to see in Vermont. And I will side with people against the big utilities and against the developers who wish to destroy our ridge lines for no environmental gain, in fact, destruction which is environmentally disastrous.
Sue Minter, we'll start this one with you. It's also an audience question. Low-income weatherization has been chronically underfunded. What plans do you have to prioritize this program and build momentum to tighten up the leaky housing stock in Vermont? Could a price on carbon pollution lend some support?
Look, what we know is that people will save on their bills when they get greater opportunity for weatherization through innovation, greater insulation, greater opportunity for heat pumps, which are both going to reduce their costs and make them cooler and warmer and more efficiently distribute that heat and cooling. And what I know is we must continue to grow our funds into that world. The Vermont Housing Conservation Board has work on this. The The credit unions have begun financing this, and I want to continue to grow how we are going to invest, not just efficiency for middle-income Vermonters, but also for the lowest-income Vermonters by continuing to invest in that fund. We do have capital bill investments. We can look to increasing our obligations in our capital bill, and I think building that as part of our affordable housing is critical.
Phil Scott.
Well, again, I spoke about this earlier, about this crisis of affordability we're facing here in Vermont, and it's very real for many people. And again, with weatherization, I think it's very essential for our future. It's the way to conserve in many different ways that can lead to a better economy. The home I spoke about here in Rutland before was just an example of what we can do when the utilities get together, when the credit unions and banks and so forth get together and offer access to capital. And if you could reduce your operating costs in your own homes, and use that savings to pay off the loans, that's the way we can advance this initiative. And I think that, again, this example in Rutland in itself is an example for others across the state.
Matt Dunn.
Investment efficiency helps everyone, particularly that targeted by the Weatherization Fund, because it's going and actually making the state more affordable for low and moderate income people. But this is also, the chronic underfunding is why we proposed the Green Jobs Fund, which will mean a $100 million bond that will not come out of our general fund or out of our capital bill. It will actually come out of a revenue bond paid for by a part of the utility bill before and the utility bill afterwards. And VEIC actually piloted a small version of this for public buildings. We can do it for apartment buildings across the state and get us caught up so it's not a fight year after year in the legislature.
Peter Galbraith.
What needs to be done is to make weatherization cash flow neutral to the person who's living in a building. And that's not that hard to do. You have a capital cost, you add it to the property tax over a period of years for the building, and then what is paid each year is the difference between what the electricity bill or the utility bill would have been before the improvement and after, so that from the point of view of the homeowner or the renter, there's no increase in actual cost, and once the improvement is paid off, then of course the total cost actually goes down. This is a program that's in place in part of our state, and it's a sensible way to go.
Bruce Listman.
Yeah, so first let me tell you, this administration leads the league in unfunded mandates. Weatherization is simply one of more than 24 that I could tell you about. But weatherization is, and energy efficiency, it's easy to say it's the right thing, and I agree. What I'd like to do is find out how much has been done so far and what's the capacity. So how much actually would it cost to weatherize the houses that require it or the commercial buildings? What's the magnitude? So Efficiency Vermont gets about $60 million a year. General Fund gave $11 million for weatherization. There ought to be a place that we can literally see a red cross through a building that's actually been weatherized. I think we should do more. It'd be good to find out how much we're spending on it, where it's going, and how well it's going. And I really urge us to get going on that.
Okay, we will start this one with Phil Scott. Also an audience question. In Vermont, transportation accounts for a significant portion of our greenhouse gas emissions, even more than electricity and heating. Should Vermont act to reduce emissions in this sector? If so, what strategies should be advanced?
Well, again, I don't think that Vermont can do that on its own. And I think it's going to have to be done nationally. I think it is being done nationally. It really is about technology and the change in technology. And with that, we're going to have to think about other ways nationally to tax and receive revenue from those who use our highways and byways. We've been doing it traditionally through the gas tax and per gallon tax. And as the cars have become more efficient, the vehicles have become more efficient, the revenues have decreased. So we're going to, in the future, have to look at some type of a mileage tax. But again, this is something that has to be done nationally. If we do it on our own, through the means of like the carbon tax and other initiatives of that nature, then that just increases the cost of living and the competitiveness here in Vermont. And I think it's the same kind of conversation that we had with single payer, which I think went on way too long. And it was another way that really was detrimental to the economy and growth of the economy that we so essentially need here in Vermont.
Matt Dunn.
When I was in the legislature in the House, I was asked to be vice chair of the Transportation Committee. And my job there was to look at the kinds of investments in transportation that go beyond just roads and bridges. And so we worked on actually bringing new ideas to collaborative kinds of transportation, whether it's public transportation, or I was asked to help make sure that we kept Amtrak rail service when they were threatening to shut it down. And not only did we get the Vermonter, but we were able to deliver the Ethan Allen Express here to Rutland. Because when we take trucks and cars off of the highway, we are reducing our carbon footprint and making it much more efficient. But we can do more. We can actually build out our electric car grid in our park and rides and throughout our state so that everyone, not just people who can afford fancy cars, everyone can take advantage of less than $1 a gallon equivalent gasoline. And we can use technology to do the kinds of ride sharings like Uber so that we can get rural public transportation happening in Vermont.
Peter Galbraith.
Well, I think we have to be realistic. In a state in which we have a large part of our population lives in a rural area, it's very hard to have sufficient public transportation that will meet the needs of the population. Nobody is going to, well, in my neighbors, they would have to walk 5 miles to get to the small town of Townsend. And how many buses a day could there be from Townsend to Brattleboro? Nobody wants to go at 9 in the morning to go shopping and come back in the evening. And when you have rail systems, you still have the problem of how you get from the rail station to your home in a rural state, if you don't happen to live in the town where the train is. And so that's why I think the emphasis has to be on technology. If we build out the broadband and cell phone network, then we can have a system where there's a registered safe drivers, registered safe passengers, and the safe driver can pick up the safe passenger, and we can pool our driving and reduce the carbon emissions that way.
Bruce Listman.
So, Chris, this reminds me of the oddest thing. Do you ever hear that saying, the beatings will continue until morale improves? Yeah. And you've never heard that before. Well, that's what people are saying, I can't afford to live here. And this question, if answered incorrectly, is a road to making things more expensive. I think our communities, Rutland and Burlington and Barre and Waterbury, that have a central core, should offer people the ability to ride and walk and even try alternative modes of getting there, whether it's a hop on, hop off, or something else. But the lion's share of people in our state are commuting distances and are living in semi-rural or rural areas. And so this question leads us to the bigger question is, so what do we care most about from this point forward? Do we care about the people of Vermont who work and live here, who care about our environment, but also have to live here? In America, people haven't gotten a raise in 15 years. So we should be cautious about going forward with innovation that may cost more than most people can afford.
Sue Minter.
Well, I've been working on this issue for the last 10 years, 4 years on the Transportation Committee, 6 years as a leader at the Agency of Transportation. We have been investing in trying to help people get out of their cars, investing in rail. And yes, we are going to bring the Ethan Allen to Burlington under the Minter administration. We're going to bring the rail back to Montreal. We are getting closer. We've put more money into that rail system than in the last 6 years than in the last 20 years. We're moving forward on both those objectives. We've also invested in transit. Yes, expanding our fixed route service, and I think we have great opportunities for innovation with a rural Uber. I'll call it Ruber. And that's how we're going to get more people. This is what's possible. And not only that, in 10 years, you're going to be able to push your button, and it isn't just that a car will come. That car will not have a driver. But we're also already been investing in electric vehicles. And yes, I'm walking the walk too with my own electric vehicle. For the first 6 weeks, I never even had to buy a gallon of gas, which wasn't good for the transportation fund. There's so much we can and must do, and we will. Thank you.
Okay. You're watching a live gubernatorial forum from the Paramount Theater in Rutland. We have 5 leading candidates for governor. We've been focusing on the climate economy. We're entering the final stretch, so we're going to do a couple of questions here that have come from the audience that are specific to this region. And then we'll be moving on to a more general question and the candidates' closing statements. This question is, and we start with Matt, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Glad somebody's paying attention. What will you do to make sure Entergy does a good job decommissioning Vermont Yankee?
This is one of those sleeper issues that's going to be absolutely critical for the next governor to focus on. Entergy, who has not always been the best actor in general, is making signs that they are not going to actually follow through on their commitment to make sure that decommissioning is done right and that the funds that have been set aside to do that decommissioning are used in an appropriate way. We absolutely have to hold them accountable. I will as governor. But we also need to figure out how to use that property in an effective way. The electrical grid that is there could allow it to be a data center or even a place that was used for new energy storage facilities. And we should look to that as an opportunity while we hold Entergy accountable to do the job that they are obligated to do.
Peter Galbraith.
I represented Windham County in the Vermont Senate. This is the Vermont Yankee plant was located in my district. It's the people of Windham County who are closest to the plant and who want the plant gone and want the radioactive materials gone. I will hold Entergy accountable. I will be as tough as I've been as a diplomat dealing with warlords in the Balkans with the leadership of Entergy to make sure that they do what they're supposed to do, that they get the material out of there as quickly as possible. So that is my commitment. That's what a Galbraith administration will do. And I am most concerned that they are going to play games with the decommissioning fund, that they are using unrealistic rates of return to say that they're going to get these enormous rates of return, and then we know at the end of the period they're not going to have the money, and that will not happen on my watch.
Bruce Lissman.
I think we can say safely that the issues about this decommissioning are large, complicated, potentially dangerous, but long-running. I think this state, the next governor, and probably the governor after that, and the governor after that will still be engaged on this issue. I think we should have the capacity to monitor what Entergy does. We should have a timeline. We should, though, recognize that NRC keeps safety to themselves, though they are subject to, of course, the normal petitioning and lobbying that states have done and we have done. And I think there's the possibility of oversight at least for the next 10 or 15 years. This is an issue that is going to be around for quite a long time. There's a world of experts out there, but there aren't so many plants that have been decommissioned over a short period of time that didn't run into some difficulties. And so with that expertise out there, I think we can find a way to provide real oversight.
Sue Minter.
As your governor, I am going to be your advocate. This is not about oversight. This is about advocacy, because we must make sure that they are accountable for what they have committed to doing. We can't allow ideas like putting tritium into the Connecticut River to go unheard. We will have a Department of Public Service who is there and a watchdog. We will have a Department of Public Health who is there monitoring and testing and understanding what is going on. And it isn't just a negotiation with Entergy, it's about the NRC as well. If I learned anything after Irene, it's that we have to be an advocate for our state. I fought with FEMA tooth and nail, because they were saying, no, we're not going to give you money for this. No, we're not going to give you money for that. I had to go to Washington. I had to go to Boston. I had to negotiate, tell the governor when to call the president. work with our congressional delegation, be an advocate and a watchdog. That's your governor that I'm going to be, and that's what's going to be necessary right away with Entergy decommissioning.
Phil Scott.
Well, it sounds like we ought to get some of those FEMA folks over to talk to the legislature about the word no. We've been, if they tell them no, maybe we have a chance here. This is all about transparency. This is a very, very long process, and this is going to take decades to make sure that we get it right. And we have a commission in place right now that's working at it as we speak, and I'm confident with the proper oversight, the amount of transparency that's necessary, that we can accomplish this. But again, we have to make sure that they're accountable. Entergy is accountable. They've been a business here in Vermont for many, many years, as well as the NRC, making sure the federal partners are working as well, because this isn't something that we can handle on our own. We need expertise in other areas, and we will seek that out. And we'll have a public service department that will oversee that as well.
We have several questions that ask variations of trying to get you to comment on national politics or the national reaction, for instance, with the Republican Party to a carbon tax or something like that. So I'm going to just throw a general question out there, and we'll start with Peter Galbraith, asking you to sum up what you feel is the mood of the electorate this year, what you are seeing in Vermont as you travel the state, but what you are seeing across this nation. Peter Galbraith.
I'm seeing people who are angry about a system that is fundamentally unfair, a system where the CEO of McDonald's makes 800 times what an employee makes working at the minimum wage, and a system in Vermont where the CEOs of our hospitals health networks make multi-million-dollar salaries, and the nurses don't get pay raises. A system where health costs go up, and again, administrative salaries balloon. That's what I'm encountering, and that's why I'm running on a program of economic justice and to reduce inequality. The best way to do that is to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. It will make Vermont more affordable for those who suffer the most. It will be a boost to the economy, and it will save taxpayers $18 million. And I'm running so that Vermont high school graduates will be able to go to college and emerge without any debt, not just for 2 years, not if they go into the military, but for all 4 years debt-free.
Bruce Lissman.
So Vermonters that I speak with, regardless of party affiliation or ideology, pretty much say a set of things. One is they feel betrayed by their government. They don't think their government's been listening to them, not on the matter of property taxes, not on the matter of taxes generally, not in the matter of most things. The fact that our government refused or declined to have any kind of ethics package says a lot to the people of Vermont. People of Vermont are concerned about their communities. It's not just opiate addiction and its ultimate results in their communities. It's the sense that things have thinned out outside of Chittenden County, that population loss, which was slow, is now beginning to gather steam, that people who said they were going to Florida never came back. And so something's happened in our communities. I think Vermonters want to change. Nationally, we say no one listens to us. But in Vermont, a small state, with in theory an intimate government process, we expect a lot more. Frankly, it's why I'm running, because people ask for a new direction. I'm the one guy who hasn't been in government, run for office, been in office for 15 years, and I believe we need a new direction, and I have those ideas.
Sue Minter.
You know, I believe that when Vermonters think about the national climate, it is about a sense of anger and divisiveness. And I think when I talk to Vermonters, they are actually proud of our state not going down that same road. Yes, people are frustrated. Yes, people are feeling actually scared and insecure, and they're worried about their kids' future. I feel very focused on the fact that wages are not keeping up with the cost of living. It's the critical issue about helping to turn our economy around. That's why I am focusing on my 3 policies. How do we create greater economic opportunity, particularly for the next generation? How do we break the barriers and help people get out of poverty with tuition-free education and career opportunity at the other end? How do we build a system of affordable and accessible early childhood education? Because over 40% of our kids are coming to kindergarten unready to learn. We can change this story, and I will.
Phil Scott.
It's unfortunate that our nation has become so deeply divided and politics has become so polarized. And it leads to a lot of frustration and anger among so many throughout our nation. And I think we have a lack of faith and trust in our government. I think we have it here in Vermont. I think we have it across the nation. And the way we fix it is to act appropriately. I've made it a point in my life, my practice in my life, whether it's in business or politics or racing, to treat others the way I expect to be treated. And I think that that's what we do. We have to act appropriately in our own backyard in order to lead by example, to be a role model for our children, in order to change the way we do business, to treat each other with respect, so that we can all live here and prosper here in Vermont and throughout our nation.
Matt Dunn.
I think we can all say that there is one Vermonter who changed politics in this country forever, and that is Bernie Sanders. And what he has done is connected with Vermonters who felt that they were alone. And in some ways, he empowered us as Vermonters to know that we are not alone, because he is someone who would tell you that his race was not about one person running for president. It's about a movement. It was a movement that started here and has to continue here. And we have that chance to be the conscience of our country. And I was proud to be the only candidate for governor in the entire United States, and the first one to endorse Bernie Sanders for president, the first governor candidate in Vermont to do so before Vermont's primary. It's because what he brought to the country gives us the chance to know that we are not alone and to deliver on that kind of vision here in Vermont.
We're going to bring it to a close. Before your closing statement, one final question that brings us back to climate change and the climate change economy. The Council on the Future of Vermont, which was a creation of the Vermont Council on Rural Development, concluded that, quote, Vermont is an incubator of ideas, a center of innovation, and a laboratory of creative solutions. Should Vermont set itself as a leader and model to advance economic solutions to climate change, what would you do as governor to lead? Bruce Listman.
Sure. I think we should be one of the leaders of innovation generally. I'm always cautious about saying this industry or that industry. We have roughly 70,000 people involved in technology, either working for technology companies or actually doing for an industrial, say, company, things related to technology. It's a fast-growing part of our economy. It's growing at multiples of the rest of the private sector. I guess I would say it differently. Beforehand, Paul and I were talking outside, and I told him about an ad I'd seen in Iowa years ago. It was a picture of a pond. It was green as could be, dead of summer, and a guy with a test tube. And he said to the camera, "I'm making energy." And a second later, he saw an explosion, and he said, "It works." And I would say we can advertise and market to the country, particularly to the region, that we are a place where young men and women, but also men and women of all ages, can have their dream and start their business, solve problems, and become the entrepreneur of tomorrow.
Sue Minter.
Yes, Vermont should continue to be a leader, just as we have through our history, whether it was the first state to ban slavery or the first state to push forward on marriage equality, on civil unions, and then legislated marriage equality. And look what it has done across this country. Of course, we will continue to be leaders. We are leading the conversation on how do we increase our renewable energy and reduce our carbon footprint. We are going to create a green highway with electric charging stations from Montreal to Boston. We are going to continue to innovate and grow opportunities for getting out of our car. We're going to have more livable, walkable communities. We are going to be the state that people want to come to innovate, to grow, and to grow a business.
Phil Scott.
We are innovative by nature, and I think we need to market that more. Innovation is part of our DNA. John Deere was from this county right here, and I think that we've seen the effects of that. GE is a major part of this community, and what they do, they build these carbon blades right here in Vermont, right here in Rutland County, and they don't do that anywhere else in the world. And it's something that we can truly be proud of, but we need to focus on the fundamentals. We're going to have to get back to the basics. We're going to have a budget that where we're living within our means, that doesn't keep growing by increasing taxes and fees. We're going to have to allow businesses to grow here. We're going to have to be a helping hand for them in the future, and for all of us to prosper more and to survive here in Vermont.
Matt Dunn.
We have always been an innovation state. In fact, that's when we have been successful, whether it was house scales or it was creating the best beer in the world. That's what we do well. And with renewable energy and energy efficiency, we have the chance to do that. But we have to be intentional about it. The work that's happening at the Innovation Center and the new maker space in Colchester under Green Mountain Power is a part of that. But we also have to make sure that we have spaces for people to live and innovate together. We propose something called Think Houses that would be right here in Rutland. We have single apartments upstairs, co-work space downstairs. You connect with an institution of higher education and you do a startup competition so people can live and work together. We also need to incentivize investment, and we've proposed for anyone who has a large capital gain, if they invest in an early stage Vermont company, they can defer that capital gain. That's how we get on track to being, again, the innovation state.
And Peter Galbraith.
I'm proud of Vermont's leadership on environmental issues. I remember when we put in the bottle bill. I remember when Act 250 was adopted. I remember when we banned billboards. And I'm sorry to say that some of our leadership is no longer there. We have been unable to expand the bottle bill to non-carbonated beverages, which is more than half of the roadside litter. And the reason we haven't been able to do it is the influence of the special interests and of the lobbyists in Montpelier, and it is because of a system in which companies make large campaign contributions, evade the limits. I am the only candidate on this stage who has never accepted corporate money, and I led the fight to ban it.
We've come to the part of the forum where you get to look at the television audience and tell them exactly what distinguishes you and your candidacy as governor. 1 minute statement starting with Sue Minter.
Well, I'm here because I believe Vermont is in difficult times and that we need to come together to face our challenges. I've had incredible opportunities working with Vermonters even in our toughest times, but also at our best, and I know that out of crisis comes opportunity. Just tonight, in my community of Waterbury, we're celebrating the 10th year of LEAP, our Local Energy Action Partnership. 4 years ago, this community organization came together, all volunteers, to say, let's make a difference. We said, can we double the amount of solar capacity in our community in 1 year? We did it in 11 months. So the next year we said, can we do it again? And yes, we've quadrupled our solar capacity in 2 years. That's the kind of opportunity that we can do. Vermonters are ingenuous, they work together, they can solve problems. I want to be the next governor because I have the skills, the vision, and the experience to get things done. I look for your support.
Phil Scott.
I'm proud to have lived in Vermont my whole life. I'm proud to be I've been a small business owner for the last 35 years. When I became lieutenant governor, I decided to do a Vermont Everyday Jobs Tour where I go out and work a day in somebody else's shoes. And that's become so essential in the way I've looked at things, the struggles that Vermonters face, and I know we can do better. I know if we concentrate and focus the next 2 to 4 years on growing the economy, that we'll have more revenue organically. We won't have to raise taxes and fees in order to survive. We can do this if we live within our means, just like we do in our own businesses, just like we do in our own daily lives. It's doable. We just have to have consensus building, get on the same page, pull in the same direction, have a goal in mind for a much more prosperous Vermont, and I'm confident together we can do it.
Thank you. Matt Dunn.
This is a very important election and an interesting time in politics. And it's not just at the national level, but here in Vermont. We're going to see the greatest change in leadership that we have seen in a generation. New governor, new lieutenant governor, new Speaker of the House, new President pro tem, and new committee chairs. And we have the chance to be able to deliver on a vision for the future that can do what Vermont does well, which is when Vermont leads, the country follows. That means making sure that no one works 40 hours a week and is still in poverty. That means that we don't let a broken website keep us from getting to universal health care reform. That means that we can lead the way on divestment from coal and making sure that we are creating jobs that work for all of Vermont. We have websites. I encourage you to check them out. Mine is mattdunn.com, because this is an important election at a critical time in our country and right here in Vermont.
Thank you. Peter Galbraith.
I admire Bernie Sanders, but I didn't adopt my progressive agenda because Bernie Sanders suddenly did well. Everything I want to do as governor is what I fought for as a state senator. In Montpelier, I opposed every special interest tax break and corporate giveaway, and I'm the only person on this stage who will get rid of them. I'm the only candidate who hasn't accepted corporate campaign contributions. I am the only elected official in Vermont who offered legislation to pay for single-payer health care, and I remain committed to that goal. I'm the only candidate with a plan to pay for 4 years free tuition at all 5 Vermont state colleges for all Vermont high school graduates. As a senator, I introduced legislation to give Vermont's lowest paid workers a 40% pay raise, and the first item on my legislative agenda as governor will be a $15 minimum wage by 2021. Elections are about choices. If you want a governor who will fight for economic justice and against inequality, I'm your choice.
And Bruce Listman.
Yes, Chris, thanks so very much, and thank you all. Well, I'm not the usual candidate, and I say often enough, I don't say the usual things. People I speak to in Vermont say the same thing in different ways. My government doesn't listen to me. I can't afford to live in my own house. My community is emptied out. I'm worried about opiate addiction. Who's in charge here? Well, I'd like to be in charge. I have a long background in managing people, leading enterprises. I've been able to build out of technology, both small and large, and I believe that one of the great things we can provide in Vermont is service to Vermonters, so that our government works for you, not the other way around. I believe in ethics package. I think it's really important. But I believe in telling you not only where your money goes, but how well it's spent. I believe we ought to work on property taxes. I think we should get rid of Healthcare Connect and move to the federal exchange. I think we should audit Medicaid. All these are a part of a cost package that we pay for, and it should end. So August 9th is the primary. It's the most important election we're going to have in probably 10 years, and this is the moment, and I hope you'll consider my candidacy.
Bruce Listman, you get the last word. Let's thank our candidates for being here in Rutland tonight. Thank all of you for watching. You've been watching a live gubernatorial forum from the Paramount Theater in Rutland, Vermont. Good night.
The preceding Vermont Gubernatorial Forum was made possible by Vermont PBS and the Vermont Council on Rural Development, Northfield Savings Bank, Ben & Jerry's, Casella Resource Solutions, the Lintillac Foundation, the Paramount Theater, and the Vermont Country Store. For information on rebroadcasts on air and on the web, go to vermontpbs.org.